Hey everybody, TacticAngel back on the PlayStation 5 to take a look at another premium ship in World of Warships Legends. This time we'll be taking a look at the Daisen, a Tier 8 premium Japanese battleship. For this reveal, we'll start with some history, move into analysis, then discuss commanders, run down the stats with you, and finish off with some gameplay. There are some time codes for you though, if you'd like to skip around. So the time period we'll be looking at is during the First World War. The Congo was just commissioned a few years earlier in 1913, and during this time the Imperial Japanese Navy was operating under their 8-8 plan, being that they wanted to have 16 capital ships, consisting of 8 battleships and 8 battle cruisers. The Daisen, as we see in game, is loosely based off of a series of sketches by Yuzuru Hiraga that were drawn up in 1916. With 4 ships in the series, Daisen is closest to Design 3, with some key differences. The purpose of these designs were to see what the characteristics of a battlecruiser would be that could reach very high speeds. All of these designs were expected to reach either 34.5 or 35 knots. The downsides to this would be pretty obvious. The ships would have relatively thin armor. Unlike the Hood, which was in some ways better armored than the Queen Elizabeth class, which was her near peer, these designs featured a 12-inch armor belt, and maybe more importantly, a deck ranging from between 1.5 and 2 inches, in exchange for a ship that was ultimately about 10% faster than Hood. Keep in mind, when World War II started some 30 years later, Hood was still among the fastest capital ships in the world, so some of the speed might have been just a bit unnecessary. The smaller of these designs were pretty huge, at 933 feet, more than 284 meters, and the latter of the two designs were 965 feet. That's between 70 and 105 feet longer than Hood. That's a pretty big ship, and these would have weighed in around 44,000 tons, plus or minus a few tons depending on the precise design. Where this takes some liberties is that these designs really should have fixed torpedo tubes. All 4 had 2 above the waterline torpedo tubes on each side, as well as 2 pairs of submerged tubes. That said, the Daisen also has a Congo-style pagoda mast that was not included in the original design. So I think what you're supposed to imagine is that maybe those torpedoes were taken out, replaced by 2 quad deck launchers, had some aviation facilities put on, and had her original 4-funnel design shrunk down to just 2 sometime between World War I and World War II. Some of these assumptions are probably more reasonable choices than others, but I'll leave that up to you. These designs were not chosen though. Instead, Japan laid down the Yamagi class battlecruisers with a more reasonable 30-knot speed, an extra turret, and twice the deck armor. Ultimately, even the Yamagis were never completed as battlecruisers due to the Washington Naval Treaty, so it's unlikely, even if Daisen had been chosen, that you'd have ever seen a ship quite like this in the world. That said, the namesake of Daisen is in keeping with Japanese tradition, with Daisen being a mountain in the Tottori prefecture of Japan. Daisen is shockingly the 6th Japanese battleship that we have at Tier 8, made all that much more shocking because it's 2/3 the number of legendary tier battleships that we have in the game in less than half of the time. That made me a bit wary about reviewing her because how much different could it be? And it turns out quite a bit. Probably the most standout trait of Daisen is her speed. Starting out with 35 knots, she's already the fastest battleship among her peers. Then you throw on an improved engine boost and she's all but guaranteed to be pretty swift, even if you choose to eat into that advantage, and sort of ridiculous if you choose to improve upon it even further. She also has among the best secondary DPM and range for her tier, though in practice the low penetration of her secondary guns may mean that these function primarily as fire starters. Daisen is a pretty good fire starter, at least with those secondary guns. She also has a number of surprisingly decent other things going for her: a large number of torpedoes, decent AA, inexplicably good torpedo protection, and detectability stats that defy expectation, all of which make for a fairly comfortable ship to play. The downside to Daisen really boils down to this being a very large target that isn't all that well armored. Being relatively easy to damage isn't going to pair well with having a small HP pool in ways I probably don't have to jabber on about. The other key downside of the ship is probably pretty obvious when looking at her. She's not gonna turn all that well, and that's putting it mildly. While not strictly a downside, the Daisen's main battery performance is a bit lackluster. You've still got 8 16-inch guns, but among Japanese battleships, the middling nature of this performance might stand out. That curiously means that for people who like most traditional battleships from the Imperial Japanese Navy line, Daisen is a very different experience. This isn't just a ship that will excel at sitting at range and blasting into its opponents with superior amounts of firepower. People who will enjoy Daisen are going to have to want to use her speed or secondary battery, if not both, to do most of the heavy lifting for this ship. As we jump into commanders, Takeo Takagi is kind of the standard battleship commander for the Imperial Japanese Navy. You might prefer this if you're really into just trying to make the most out of 16-inch guns and ruin every cruiser's life. But Daisen may not be the best vessel to do that in. Sure, high speed will help you if you want to play flanker and get into a good position, but that speed and those angles you create will have to make up for Daisen simply being an okay artillery platform as battleships are concerned. You could easily make the argument that the penalty for gyrating drill bits is overridden by Daisen's inherent benefits. And sure, a 31.5 knot battleship with an extra 10% damage is decent enough, but if you choose Takagi, I definitely advise thinking about whether better position would offer you more advantages in terms of damage than just that boost. I think the short story is, though, if you want to sit at range and dump on enemies with AP in a Japanese battleship, there are certainly better choices out there that won't cost you 25,000 steel. Nobutake Kondo isn't a commander that normally gets a lot of love from Japanese ships, thanks to the focus most people put on them being able to hit things with big guns more than anything else. In this case, you get all the ordinary sort of advantages of survivability that he offers, but you can also use Porcupine. And if you're not using him for some other ship, which is at least somewhat likely, there's no reason not to throw on even more secondary stuff, and then try to play the battle barge that can very quickly maneuver into a position, then largely sit there at 8 to 10 kilometers and tank reasonably well, and then hopefully hold on until either your enemies make a mistake or your team can help you win that side. Then you can quickly relocate and do it all over again. In this case, the downside is that the ship is doing most of the work for you, and wargaming will penalize you for this sort of play. Then we have Togo. He's obviously the base commander, and usually I say something dismissive about him on a Japanese battleship. Let me say this, there's really no fixing the problems with this ship. You can't make it smaller, and you can't make it turn any better. But when your strengths are that you're pretty decent in everything, you're fast, you don't want to get shot from range, you start to look at increasing the fire chance of your secondaries a different way, improving your sea detectability, and maybe making the ship go even faster. I mean, I may be saying that you should play this ship something like a meme, but there aren't that many downsides to it that don't already just come with the boat. As we jump into stats, everything you see on screen should be base statistics, with the exception of concealment, which does include the camo that comes with the ship. Daisen's survivability is probably the only place where she really doesn't excel. Having just 69,300 hit points, she lags about 10% behind your average battleship at the tier. Your armor isn't a great story either, though you will enjoy having the standard 32mm bow. You also have a 32mm deck, and that's definitely a problem when taking shots from battleships from range or being hit by heavy HE. If we strip away the armor, there's a bit more of a mixed bag. You have 305mm on your belt, which is pretty light for a battleship, but it actually extends well above the waterline. In addition, behind this you have a confused mess of space, turtleback, and citadel. Near as I can tell, it's a 76mm turtleback the whole length of the ship, but on the forward half it's on the citadel layer, and on the back half it's on the casemate layer? Doesn't make a lot of sense, and the angle doesn't seem like it should be all that effective. But in my experience, this doesn't get as heavily punished as you'd expect. But then again, I've only played a dozen games in it, so buyer beware. Then to round everything out, we have the torpedo protection. 53%. That's best at the tier. It's really hard to justify it from a 1916 design. I assume this is here because a ship that's this long with its maneuverability characteristics might be a fair bit unplayable with the kind of torpedo protection this thing probably deserves, but 53% does certainly take the edge off of getting hit by torpedoes. As far as artillery on Daisen, you've got 4 turrets with 2 16-inch guns each in a traditional arrangement. You've got a sort of meh 17.1 kilometer range, a 29-second reload, and average turret rotation. With 6,500 HE and 30% fire chance, you have about 5% less HE damage than average and are the worst fire starter at the tier with your main battery. Your 12,900 AP damage is even a bit less unimpressive overall, placing you closer to 15% below damage per minute. Strangely enough though, particularly for a Japanese ship, we are going to mention the secondaries. Daisen starts with 6.8 kilometers on the secondary battery, which you can obviously play around with if you want. And with 5 twin 127s and 8 140s on each side, you end up with a pretty good damage potential and fire potential out of them. Second only to Alsace among HE secondary ships, and with better range. And if you want to add even more to that, then you've got torpedoes. There are 2 quad launchers on each side of the ship. Now these fire a bit like a Tago, being one firing forward into the side and the other firing backwards into the side to both port and starboard of the ship. At 10 kilometers, there's little chance that you'll fire them in open waters without people noticing you, but they're still going to find their uses. Detectability is pretty high at 1.7 kilometers, and with just 67 knot speed, that creates a high reaction time. Depending on the range where you use them though, that may or may not be a big deal. Coming next to AA, Daisen's AA is actually pretty average. 101 damage at 5 kilometers isn't extraordinary, but at least you're getting your flak out to a reasonable range. The rest of your 359 damage per second is all in the 3 to 3.5 kilometer range, which is the kind of AA that will tax the enemy CV a plane or two for each strike on you, but won't exactly stop them from getting an attack off. That said, as far as a Japanese ship goes, you'd be hard-pressed to complain about the amount of AA she has. Next, we come to the most bonkers category for Daisen, maneuverability. This ship has easily the highest speed for a battleship at tier 8 right now. Easily by like 3 knots. It also has the widest turning circle of any battleship in World of Warships Legends. 1,100 sits comfortably about 50 meters wider than even Grosser Kurfürst, though, to be fair, 30 meters less than Stalingrad. Daisen is definitely a straight line sprinter, and if you want to dodge, you're probably going to need to take engine mod for the brake dodge. Daisen is also just a bit on the visible side, ranking 100 meters more visible than average by sea. She's totally typical from air, and while firing from smoke, you have to imagine that a player wonders what he's doing. In any case, 15.4 is 500 meters higher than average, and a stat that is not only not typically useful to a battleship, but would definitely be an atypical tactical choice for a battleship that can move this quickly. When we look at consumables, half of these are pretty average and half of these are actually pretty interesting. Boring half first, Daisen comes with a 10-second damage control party, recharging every 80 seconds, same as Iwami and Izumo. For a Japanese ship, that could be worse. Following up with 3 charges of a repair party, restoring 0.5% per tick for 28 seconds, which is probably the same repair party that 3/4 of all battleships have. In your next slot, you have to choose between 2 regular aircraft options, a fighter, which seems like the weakest choice for an even-tiered battleship that has decent AA, or you can get a spotter aircraft that will make your distance shots a bit more accurate. But these are in every way normal effects. The third option here is interesting because it's one of the first ships that has a unique secondary consumable, lasting just 25 seconds with a much faster recharge. Color me skeptical that you'd ever need 5 of these. Most battleships don't use the 3 that they have, and it would take you almost 10 minutes to do that, but it's definitely interesting, and it certainly seems that they're trying to push you towards playing this as a secondary ship right up until the XP screen. Finally, we come to a speed boost. It is odd for a Japanese ship to have a speed boost, at least among non-destroyers, but this one not only has a speed boost, but it is a 12% speed boost, which can propel this ship to truly absurd speeds. Speeds that even Japanese destroyers can't reach. Anyway, let's get on to the gameplay. And for this, we'll be on Land of Fire. We're starting out on the southwest flank. We'll go ahead and get a look at who's on the enemy team. We've got an Anhalt and a Bismarck. They might be the only battleships on the enemy team that I can reasonably match up with in terms of damage output. We've also got 3 destroyers and a cruiser. My immediate plan here is to try to take up some sort of strong position on the outside, depending on how things shake out, that'll give us some option for some crossfire. Things are going to start to get going here pretty quickly because you can already see ships getting spotted. So I should get to my commander. I guess this is part of some secret plot that I have to discredit myself by playing crazy things, but we are going to be playing Togo Haihachiro. We're doing exactly what it looks like we're trying to do, which is to make this boat as fast as it can go. We're going to try to get a little bit extra fires out of our secondaries, and we're going to maybe hit a few more things thanks to the improved range. But this is a very strange build. It's a very strange build. But I think this ship is pretty strong stats-wise, and so my first thought was, well, let's bide our time at the beginning, and let's, you know, wait until a reasonably opportune moment, and then just jam this thing in one part of the map, and see if anybody can deal with it. It's an inelegant strategy, but I found some success with it. And other than that, what you're going to be seeing here is pretty much out of the box accuracy, out of the box damage if I ever manage to hit anything. You can see I switch over to my shell follow view there for a moment just to make sure that I was correct. My shells had landed and I had managed to hit nothing. Fine. We do land a couple of hits on the Loyang in the 8 capture point. I'm feeling like I'm not really feeling pushing this side all the way. We've got 2 battleships coming around the top. There's a third one that I can see, and also the cruiser. And then all it takes is for the destroyer to YOLO me around that island, and there's not going to be a whole lot that I can do about it. So we start moving towards the middle. And after a few seconds of sailing directly at the cap, we are going to turn out, because I don't actually want to go in there and challenge it Loyang. At this point, there's still too many battleships that can probably shoot me. And so we take a slightly more safe choice, which is we're going to sail away for a while.
All stations, reporting the position of a strategic target.
We are not presently spotted, which means that something is obstructing the destroyer's view. We're not immediately jumping out to get ourselves spotted either. We're going to wait a few seconds here to just see how things are shaking out, see if we can't spot all the players on the team. Overall, our team's doing pretty well, having already taken the 2 other caps, so we could certainly stand to wait. The AP, not very effective there. Obviously, we're going to bounce off the front of most battleships' bows. So we are going to load up the HE. This has the added effect of hopefully knocking out some of his secondaries in case we ever end up kind of close to the Bismarck. Now he did turn out, and though that torpedo does look okay, I don't think it's going to quite have the range. The 10 kilometers, we used it a bit at the beginning for maybe some area denial. If there was a really aggressive destroyer, he might have run into it. Otherwise, we're just lowering our torpedo percentage here, but whatever, nobody else sees that unless I really want to show it to them. And our team is doing relatively okay. We're up on points because of the cap situation. Otherwise equal on ships. We do finally tag a fire onto the Bismarck. And we're going to turn out a little bit here because I don't want to find out how easy it is to Citadel me at this range. So far, I haven't really found out how easy it is. And I keep thinking it's because I'm getting lucky. I feel like I'm right about that. I don't think it has anything to do with me having played this ship particularly well. That Flandre certainly has an opportunity here. But you can see we get, I guess, spared the possibility by a turret hit. And otherwise he does very little damage. I guess I have two options here, one of which is to turn in and push into B. It looks like we already have enough people there. I decide to turn out and go back towards A, because we have fewer ships there. This is part of the learning curve, I guess you could call it. It's definitely one of the wider learning curves. I guess we'll go ahead, hit the speed boost, and make up all that ground that we already have made up once in this game. Just driving in circles. Driving in circles. That said, I'm getting my money's worth out of this game because we're getting to demonstrate exactly how fast this thing can be, and also maybe demonstrating its power as a gunboat, which is not great. 44.4 knots though. That's pretty good for a battleship. Now that's straight line speed. I'm gonna lose a lot of it if I try to turn. But there are very few ships that can relocate like this. Thinking the VIII may turn out, I start loading AP. He continues to turn more in. And even worse than that, you can see that the cap is now being taken. That means somebody's in there. And I've got a pretty good idea about where he probably is based on where he spotted me. We aim high, and when aiming high, we do manage to get a decent chunk of damage off of the VIII. That's something in the area of 12,000 damage. This is a calculated turn to hopefully have dodged torpedoes that were shot at me like 10 seconds ago. But we're going to have to continue to maneuver in order to continue to hopefully dodge most of the torps. We're not hitting the damage control just yet, though we are using ours. That looks really, really bad. But it does show off just how ridiculous the torpedo reduction is in this ship. You can easily picture that you could run up on a German battleship or a German cruiser that had a lot of torpedoes, and you could eat probably all of them. And that was pretty much the plan all along. In this case, we were able to run up on two ships. For most of the time, we said deal with it to the VIII with our bow. And then we just ate all the torpedoes from the Luoyang. Managed to finish both of them off. 2 ships for 1. And not even 1, I'm not dead yet. So I'm going to sail up on this destroyer. Try to get him within will to rebuild range. I probably could have timed this a bit better, been a bit more patient to get more out of it, but we hit a heal instead. Getting a little worried about our range. We get our heal out and continue to burn for a bit because we had to damage con those floods. Now, I was curious that the Daisen did not do more damage. My guess is that the timing didn't work out for him, because otherwise I feel like I might have been toast. Might also have been that I just got ahead of his rotation speed and he just couldn't get the guns around back on target by the time I passed him. He got the relatively short-range torpedoes. At those ranges, obviously, the detectability doesn't really matter because you don't have enough time to dodge in the first place. This is a bad shot by me. The Shimanto looked like he was stationary and then started moving just a split second before I shot. And obviously, those aren't going to hit anything. Since I'm not spotted, that means he's somewhere either behind the island or out of range. It turns out he was behind the island. And as he starts shooting, I actually beat him on the spot. But he does get a little bit of a glimpse that I'm over here before I disappear behind the island. Now, the reason why that's going to be important is because he knows I'm here and because I know he has torpedoes. I'm going to want to do something about that before it's too late. And before it's too late is a little bit earlier in this ship than maybe others, thanks to that really, really wide turning circle. You can see our secondaries reaching out, trying to get that second skill kill. But I think 16-inch guns are going to do the job. Obviously, that damage total was a little bit higher on the final calculation than it probably should have been. But this happened during the last hit bug, so we're probably 6,000 or 8,000 damage more than we should have, but 150 ain't exactly bad. As we head towards the last few seconds of this game, you can see we're very close to 1,000 points. It looks like our destroyer is wisely not going to throw his life away. But he does take a couple of shots. He'll be fine behind this island here. And this is an unnecessary shot, but I didn't think he was going to get a shot back out on me. I was wrong. Still managed to tank it. The game's over. We walk away with a win without the universe punishing us for our stupid build. So anyway, closing thoughts on Daisen in Legends. I actually think this is starting to get a bit silly because the first couple of years there weren't many standout Japanese premium ships, particularly battleships. Now we've gotten several decent battleships in a row. Daisen is no exception to that and is pretty clearly the most unique of the big gun Japanese battleships at tier 8, and in that sense she's probably a good steel ship. But with that disclaimer that she's really nothing like her other IJN counterparts. She definitely feels like a good reward for playing the game a lot, though I imagine this is one of those ships that is probably only going to play well in standard battle. That's really the only thing that would hold me back from getting this ship myself, because you play standard battles for fun, and if I'm playing for fun, am I really going to be playing tier 8? I don't know. What about you? In any case, we get a little bit more XP than we probably deserved. A few more credits because of that glitch in the game. But overall, decent game to show off the ship. Something you're probably not going to see from a lot of other people out there. Those are my thoughts on Daisen. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think, and as always, I'll see you on the next one.